The Conservatives justify themselves as the real party of working people with their proposed tax credit changes?
Question is about whether the Conservatives can justify themselves as the real party of working people. Suzanne Evans.
No, I don't think they can. I'd like to take issue, actually, with Amber when you said you were transparent. Amber, you were clearly not transparent in your manifesto. We were all, and Andy's nodding, you know, we were all trying to find out exactly where these 12 billion cuts were going to come from, and you wouldn't say. And you're still not saying, and you're still actually keeping us in the dark. Well, if that's a consistency you're proud of, then fine. I wouldn't think it's a very good consistency. Look, you know, UKIP's position on this is that we support a benefit cap because we think that while you've got to have a very strong and supportive safety net for people who fall on hard times, and it could happen to any one of us in this audience if it hasn't already, it cannot be a hammock, and we can't support a benefits lifestyle. So we support that, and we obviously want to clamp down on welfare abuse. But there are some things that the Conservative Party have done that I think have just been awful. The bedroom tax is one thing.
Hang on, we're talking about things they're going to do, not things they've done. Everybody knows what they've done. You're complaining you don't know what they're going to do.
Well, I would like to see them abolish the bedroom tax, for start off, because I think it's been grossly unfair.
And what about the working tax credits?
And in terms of tax credits, I think, you know, at the moment you can get tax credits up to quite a high income, but they're being abused, actually, by big corporate companies who are using tax credits as a way to subsidise paying low wages for people.
Sorry to interrupt you. So you mean you're in favour of Osborne's proposals if he makes them to cut back on working tax credits?
Well, no, because unfortunately it's not going to, while we've still got the tax credit system. I mean, first of all, if you're going to try and take people out of poverty, if you're going to try and make it pay to go to work, the first thing you've got to do is take everybody on minimum wage out of tax altogether. Because if it's the minimum wage is the minimum that anyone can live on, that is the first thing to do. It is absolutely ridiculous, it seems to me, to waste all that time and money on admin, taking tax off people and then giving them giving it back to them. And I'd like to see an economy where more people are in work, obviously, and there are all sorts of reasons about how we could get that going, but where ultimately we don't need to pay tax credits because we have a strong economy and people are in work and working and not having to take handouts from the state.
You, sir.
It's just not on, it's not right.
You, sir.
Yes, for me, this is not so much about cuts, it's about efficiencies. When Labour Party brought in tax credits, I understand for a number of years, the system cost more than the money that was actually being given out. It's absolutely ridiculous. So it's time, I think, to go right back, raise the entry level of taxation, wipe tax credits off the system. I get letters, quarterly newsletters. My wife at the same address gets exactly the same amount all the time. This is the monolith. Get rid of it. You will save as much in efficiency by doing away as you will by targeting any one individual group.
OK. Thank you very much. Well, on that...
If the decision was in your hands, what would you do about Greece?
If I could do one thing for Greece, I'd give it what a country in trouble needs more than anything else, and that's its own currency. Yeah. I mean, that is what Greece would... If they still had the drachma would plunge in value, Greek goods would be incredibly cheap. Not only could we all go there on holiday, but its exports would be a lot better. That's how countries get out of a mess. That's how we get out of the mess. On Black Wednesday, we came out of the ERM, the proto-Euro thing. It was painful at the time, but then our huge recovery started. I mean, the pound has been such an asset to us. When the crisis struck, the pound was devalued, we became more competitive. It's such a help. But right now, when they're locked in the euro, they can't do that. They have to go through this kind of pseudo-austerity, where they've got to do this internal devaluation. And it's heartbreaking seeing the things that right now the EU are asking the Greek government for. You know, to double the VAT on restaurants, to cut the government budget even more, and all for what? All to remain part of this bizarre euro project.
If you're right, why should they be so keen to remain in the euro?
Well, because leaving it is a painful process. We found that out 20 years. There's no denying. There's no good option for Greece. They've just got the choice of two bad options. But I reckon that the pain of leaving the euro now and defaulting is lesser evil. The greater evil is being in this Groundhog Day of negotiations with the EU every 6 months and putting through these cuts that are causing so much incredible misery to the Greek people.
What do you think the outcome will be?
Well, I don't think the outcome will be. Well, I actually think that the Greek government almost want to get kicked out. I mean, you know, the Greek, they're on a mandate to stay in the EU and get a deal. Those two things can't happen. I think they know that.
I think the whole idea that the EU in the 70s and 80s was this benign body which was sort of socially sort of liberal and fine. Actually, I think that is now been shown up for something. And, you know, I'm a lefty. I used to believe in that project, but I think I don't believe in that project
You'll
anymore.
vote out, will you? When
I think I will vote out. I think that tradition of people like Tony Benn, I think they were right about the European Union, and I think that the lefties need to start saying that a bit more now.
Okay. Bravo.
You say.
Isn't it worrying that Greece might approach Russia and become allied to Russia if they drop out of the euro and the EU?
Suzanne Evans.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear that.
I worry that the Greeks will approach Russia and get support from Russia if they drop out of the EU.
No, because I think
Remember,
they'll
they
have
went to Moscow and had
far stronger
discussions
allies, and I suspect that this trip to Russia was probably a little bit more sort of, you know, banner waving actually to try and get Angela Merkel and her chums to bail out a little bit. I'd completely agree with both Giles and Fraser. Greece was conned into joining this Eurozone, into joining this club that it really should never have joined, and it can't play by the rules, and it would be absolutely best for it if it just bailed out. You know, Giles talked about austerity earlier here in the UK. What we're suffering here is nothing compared to what Greece is going through. And to go back to the original question, you know, if the decision was in my hands, what would I do for Greece? I would have to put the people of my country first. And at the moment, the people of Greece, they're living on £450 a month is the average wage in Greece. It's tiny. Half of young people of working age are unemployed. There's a 28% unemployment rate overall. You know, prostitution's increased 150%. The suicide rate has rocketed. This is a country that's facing austerity like we have never known. It is astonishingly bad. And they need to end the agony, break free of the euro. Now, the EU is saying, well, if you leave the euro, you have to leave the European Union as well. I think that's probably another bit of flannel that we're getting from the EU, but absolutely, I agree with Giles, they should pull out of the EU as well. Self-determination, self-governance. They can start to rebuild their economy after the short-term glitches. What I find astonishing at the moment is that the EU is demanding more austerity and is insisting that, as Fraser said, they put taxes on tourism. Now, tourism is 15% of Greek GDP. They're basically trying to batter down
Right. So,
one
Suzanne,
of their most
from
important
your point of view, you would just
economies.
simply leave.
I would simply leave.
All right,
I
you
think
say,
it
what
would
would
be
you
the best
do?
in the long term.
It's obvious that the EU is a failed experiment. Greece, so eager to join the EU, grossly overvalued the drachma,
Yes.
and the EU accepted this on their calculations. And I agree with most of the panel that the only answer is pull out of the EU and the currency.
You know, even if they do a deal, even if they pay this 1.7 billion that they've got to pay by the end of the month, they still owe the IMF over 33 billion. So there'll have to be another deal, and then another deal, and another deal coming down the tracks. And like we say, let's get out.
You said that Europe was a success. The EU was a success. Spain's suffered. Ireland's suffered. Greece has suffered. How can you say it's a success with all these struggling countries within the EU?
All right, point made. And you, sir, there in the centre.
I think the problem, you've hit the nail on the head, is that you shouldn't borrow money if you can't pay it back. All these countries have joined the euro. They've taken all the money that they can. They've afforded the money, and now we're blaming the creditors for giving the money in the first place. If I don't pay my mortgage, I lose my house. That's the rules. That's how it works.
What can the government do to stop the flow of illegal immigrants coming across the Channel to the UK from Calais?
What can the government do to stop the flow of illegal immigrants coming across the Channel? Suzanne Evans.
It's dreadful, isn't it? The scenes that we've seen on our television over the last few days are absolutely heartbreaking. I mean, this is a humanitarian crisis such as I don't ever remember. Apparently there are something like 1 million people literally queuing up on the North African coast to try and get into Europe. And whilst in an ideal world we would want to find some way to accommodate them, the simple fact is that we can't. There's an unlimited supply of people. The 3,000 people that we have in Calais, those terrible scenes, if they come into Britain, there will be more people coming and more people coming. And where will it end? And eventually, this small, crowded island, which is already struggling to support people in terms of housing, in terms of schooling, in terms of healthcare, it's just going to get to breaking point, and it's going to impact on us too. So it has to stop. And for me, that means, I think, first of all, tackling the problem at source. So we need UN decisions that can actually help to improve the situations in the war-torn countries that are obviously fueling this plight of these migrants. But it also, I'm afraid, means practicing a little bit of tough love. And it means not letting them in. It means saying to the European Union, we already have a veto on migration, but holding fast to that and saying, I'm sorry, we simply cannot take any more people. Britain is brilliant, actually. We already have taken more than our fair share of asylum seekers, I think, 28,000 in Europe. We've taken a lot more than many other people in Europe. I think we've already taken a huge amount. And yeah, we have to basically also tackle the people traffickers. People trafficking now has become a massive industry. I think I read somewhere that it's actually overtaken the illegal drug industry in terms of the money it creates. I think it's about a £20 billion industry now. And these people are criminals, they are cruel, they are brutal. We've had scenes, you know, they're pushing Christians overboard from the boats coming over from the Mediterranean. They're shooting people on the shores. We have to stop it. And the only way we can actually stop this brutal and cruel trade is by saying enough.
Well, Amber, you said that foreign aid was trying to help countries. That is just factually incorrect. There have been studies about simple mosquito nets where the administrators were pocketing £500,000, £200,000 simply administrating the jobs, and the mosquito nets didn't even work. By your own standards, your foreign aid sort of a programme is a shambles, is it not?
Completely disagree. The mosquito nets sprayed with anti-malaria have been incredibly effective at saving children's lives.
Are you disagreeing with the study? Are you disagreeing with the study that looked into the specific mosquito net case and said it was a failure? Are you disagreeing with that study?
I am disagreeing with that. I'm saying the point was they needed to be sprayed with the anti-malaria
You can't just
spray.
make things up. A study is a study.
I'm not making it up.
What we should say to these people is welcome, absolutely welcome.
Giles, a moment ago you were talking about the problems of people not having enough work in this country. How is that going to help working class people when our population, which is already at an all-time high, how is that going to help?
I tell you what helps. It's not there's just a small amount of jobs to go round. Actually, people who come here and actually add to our economy and create a more vibrant economy, build up our economy and create more jobs. Right. I think these are really good people to have.
And I think there's too many people in this country already. We can't accommodate more coming into this country. I'm a nurse in the NHS and I can see how overcrowded this country is. We're talking about people starving from other countries. There are people starving in this country as well. There's not enough housing for people in this country. We can't accommodate any more.
For me, all of these arguments are just pointing towards an Australian-style point system where we can make the discretion between refugees, claimants, people that come here to work.
Absolutely right, and that's UKIP's policy. And just to go back to the ladies talking about the NHS, you're absolutely right. 30% of doctors in the NHS are immigrants and do a great job. But you know what? Only 5% of health workers in Germany are immigrants, and part of the problem is we're not training our own people. True. And, you know, the Royal College of Nurses has 100,000 applicants for nursing jobs every year from people in this country, and only 20,000 actually get places. Right. We need to be creating a heck of a lot more medical school in those places.
Yeah, to tackle health issues, costs as well as the issue of health itself, rising obesity, diabetes, should high sugar, high fat foods have higher tax or disincentives versus locally produced or healthy foods have a
in other words,
incentive.
should the state tax high fat and high sugar because of the harm done, yes?
Tax or incentives and disincentives?
Yes.
The answer is no, absolutely not. I have a kind of personal relationship with this, really, because all my life I've suffered, well, since puberty, I've suffered from a disease called lipedema, which makes me abnormally fat in my arms and my legs. And I only discovered this about 3 years ago, after a lifetime of being told I was obese and I was overeating and I needed to lose weight. And actually, the condition I have, and obesity is very complicated. It's not just about sugar or fat. It's not about, it's not as simple as saying what you eat. If you eat too much, you'll put on weight. If you don't eat enough, you lose weight. I know personally that's not that simple. And so a simple headline answer like that, it's a great soundbite for a politician, but believe you me, it won't work. Obesity is much more complex than that.
Thank you very much. We've got time for one last question, I think, from James Hanley, please. James Hanley.
Is Alan Milburn right when he said that anybody defending Labour's last general election manifesto is practising a form of self-delusion?
Well, the Labour manifesto was so woolly, it didn't really have anything to go on. It wasn't costed. UKIP's manifesto was fully costed. You know, everything... No, it wasn't. Everything that we had in the UKIP manifesto had a measurable
let's not fight the last
outcome.
election now. We just,
and,
just a quick comment on what Milburn said.
That's why, Andy, you know, you have lost 75% of your voters, working-class voters from Labour in certain parts of the country have come to UKIP.
And we've come full circle back to the beginning of the programme, but we do have to stop there because...
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.